They have the ability to take people to places they have not been before. Because winning leaders spend a considerable investment of time developing other leaders, they have well-developed methodologies for teaching and coaching people, including the ability to acknowledge their mistakes and share their challenges and limitations authentically, serving as role models for others. Successful leaders and organizations have performance goals and values goals. They achieve their goals in both categories. They know they must develop a core competency in being able to continuously and creatively destroy and remake themselves to meet customer demands. They know they have to do business in a world in which customers are changing faster than most organizations can. At the age of 62, 3 years before his retirement, Bill Weiss, chairman and CEO of Ameritech, embraced the transformation of the organization from an old-style baby bell telephone company with its regulated regional monopoly to an exceptional competitor in the new world of telecommunications. The achievement of this goal demanded revolutionary change. The best way, I know, to get people to accept the need for change is not to give them a choice. The organization has to know that there is a leader at the top who has made up his mind, who is surrounded by leaders who have made up their minds, and that they are going to drive forward no matter what, says Weiss. Warren Bennis, in one of his numerous essays, writes about the effects of leadership. Leadership can be felt throughout an organization. It gives pace, energy, and rhythm to the work and empowers the workforce. Empowerment is the collective effect of leadership. In organizations with effective leaders, empowerment is most evident in 4 themes. People feel significant. Everyone feels that he or she makes a difference to the success of the organization. The difference may be small, the prompt delivery of potato chips to a mom and pop grocery store, or developing a tiny but essential part for an airplane. But where they are empowered, people feel that what they do has meaning and significance. Learning and competence matter. Leaders value learning and mastery, and so do people who work for leaders. Leaders make it clear that there is no failure, only mistakes that give us feedback and tell us what to do next. People are part of a community. Where there is leadership, there is a team, a family, a unity. Even people who do not especially like each other feel sense of community. When Neil Armstrong talks about the Apollo explorations, he describes how a team carried out an almost unimaginably complex set of interdependent tasks. Until there were women astronauts, the men referred to this feeling as brotherhood. I suggest they rename it family. Work is exciting. Where there are leaders, work is stimulating, challenging, fascinating, and fun. An essential ingredient in organizational leadership is pulling rather than pushing people toward a goal. A pull style of influence attracts and energizes people to enroll in an exciting vision of the future. It motivates through identification rather than through rewards and punishments. Leaders articulate and embody the ideals towards which organization strides. For a business leader to be a truly global business leader, he or she must be aware of the cultural norms and traditions that provide the context of meanings that define reward and punishment. In some cultures, and with some people, Financial compensation is not the most powerful motivator. Rather, it may be recognition and acknowledgement by peers and the community. The integration of a diversity of needs of stockholders and stakeholders is ever challenging. Leaders create exceptional cultures that define organizational life. Broadly defined, the meaning of culture includes the ways of thinking, communicating, and behaving a group or organization of people has in common. Culture can be thought of as the result of the development, improvement, or refinement of the mind, emotions, interests, meanings, and values of a group or organization of people. Leaders manage the culture. Lou Platt, the president and CEO of Hewlett-Packard, was recently asked what he considered his job to be. He replied that 75% of his job was managing the Hewlett-Packard culture. The most powerful contextual influence at Hewlett-Packard is something simply called the Hewlett-Packard way. It is our experience that very few corporate cultures are consciously created. Most business systems end up with the corporate culture that happened while they were making other plans. Only very few, very exceptional companies have thoughtfully designed and skillfully implemented corporate cultures. People who work in the culture of an exceptional company are very clear about what is expected of them in terms of behavior and results. In these companies, how people behave in the process of getting results is as important as the results themselves. The ability of people in an organization to work collaboratively as a team is highly dependent on culture. Because in the process of growing up, most of us have been conditioned to function individually and competitively. This is especially challenging in the United States, where individuality can be an obsession. The concept of people coming together and working in functional teams is in conflict with what has become many people's nature. A strong organizational culture can overcome old habits. The nature of the Japanese culture supported individuals embracing the concept of working in teams, providing a fertile environment for Deming's work on total quality. Deming, who began developing his ideas at Bell Labs, could find little support for his theories in the business culture of the United States, given the preoccupation with individual achievement. Corporate presidents and CEOs who have successfully taken on the challenge of developing effective team behaviors in their organizations report that success took more time and was much more difficult than they had imagined. The rewards, however, were also much greater than they had hoped for. These business leaders also discovered that the cost reductions resulting from people working together in effective teams are very significant. To have people in an organization come together and work in functional teams rather than focus on individual effort requires that the work and people processes within the organization recognize and reward human behaviors that are consistent with team behaviors. All too often in organizational life, we demand collaboration, but reward individual achievement. This leaves the people who have committed themselves to working as a member of a team feeling devalued. As leaders and managers, we may say we want people to collaborate, but we have a reward system that promotes individuals who excel individually. The net result of such a system will be to encourage internal competition rather than collaboration. And while we may have been taught that competition is a good and wonderful thing, a significant case can be made that this is not true. In fact, within an organization, competition is almost always a dysfunctional idea. The concept of collaboration rather than competition, and the idea of achieving our personal best as a member of a team rather than individual effort while working alone, probably deserves more time than we have today. As leaders and managers, we must learn to empower people rather than consolidate our own power. The word empower is suffering from overuse, without the meaning clearly being understood. Essentially, to empower a person or a team of people means that we charge them to take action. This implies that we trust them and requires that they trust us, not to continually second-guess or disagree with the actions they take. Trust is essential to all organizations. A core function of leadership is the management of trust. Certainly, it is very difficult to get anything worthwhile to happen in organizations that have low level of trust and instead have high levels of suspicion. What most of us don't know about trust is it has to be actively managed. The main determinants of trust are honesty, reliability, and consistency. Research studies show that people would much rather follow individuals they can count on, even when they disagree with their viewpoint, than people they agree with but who shift positions frequently. Another way to say all of this is that we must create and give people the space or the room to take action that is consistent with the vision and values of the enterprise. To maximize the energy in a global business system, effective leaders weave universal themes and values into the purpose and vision of the enterprise. For example, the theme of sustainability and environmental responsibility as a value reach out and unite people across national boundaries. Exceptional organizations are very good indeed at leading and managing their human assets. Certainly, these organizations have excellent mechanisms in place, mechanisms that are continually reviewed and refined. However, these mechanisms absolutely rely on leadership and cultural context for their effectiveness. Mechanisms have no power independent of human intention. Evoking and focusing human intent and will is a vital function of leadership. It is human intention focused by a well-conceived and implemented culture that provides the organizational power to succeed and the power to turn a dream of success into the reality of success. Bill Hewlett and Dave Packard were asked what they considered the most important product of the Hewlett-Packard Company. They answered, the Hewlett-Packard Company. Warren Bennis consistently advocates that an essential function of leadership is the management of attention and meaning. Leaders manage attention through a compelling vision that brings others to a place they have not been before. To make dreams apparent to others and to align people with them, leaders must communicate their vision. No matter how marvelous the vision, the effective leader must use a metaphor, a word or a model that makes the vision clear to others, so they invest meaning and align to the vision. This might easily be the crucial function of leadership. Noel Tichy also makes a compelling case that this is so. Quite a few global business enterprises are more resourceful and influential than the governments of some of the countries they do business in. Globalization trends are generating common global values that are compatible with our aspirations and visions as a true global community of shared responsibilities and common goals. In the course of a conversation with the American television producer Norman Lear, in which we explored the scarcity of leadership in the world and the power and influence business leaders possessed beyond the boundaries of the enterprise they headed, Lear broadened the scope of the conversation in the following way. The media is clearly a partner in the global power base. I don't think it's a 50-50 partnership, however. I believe we can make the case that the media is looking for leadership, that it is willing to be led. I think this is just the way we are as human beings, both individually and as groups. We are all looking for strong leadership. I'm tilting at the windmill of helping businesses to understand it has this enormous and unsought responsibility by virtue of the 7 hours a day of television it sponsors in the average American home, in more than one room, and even on the beach. Advertising has profoundly affected the American people and continues to do so on a daily basis. This is now developing into the global norm. When I talk about this influence, somebody will say to me, well, that's the writers. I say no. Writers are not the source of the paramount influence of television. In recent years, there have been 10 to 20 commercials in a single half hour of primetime television. And every single one of those imprints tells the same story. You are what you consume. Success is what you consume. You are successful with women if you smell this way or drink this beer. You are the envy of your peers if you drive this car. And if your deodorant fails, well, then your life will. The terrible irony is that most Americans are faithful to the same messages, consume the same products, but don't have lives and especially experiences similar to those portrayed in the commercials. Because people can't find themselves in this implied place, they think there must be something wrong with them. Relentlessly consistent, utterly single-minded and focused, the clear, dominating influence of commercial television is, you are what you consume. The adage has become, the truth is what sells, and if it doesn't sell, it ain't reality, and it ain't truth. We have to wake up to this, and I'm ever hopeful that we will. Restated, the message is salvation is to be found in consumption. What is the deep motivation behind this relentless consumption? We seek a superior experience of being alive. Freud tells us that we are wired up to seek pleasure and avoid pain. Unfortunately, this diagnosis is as shallow as our culture. Our hearts yearn for a profound experience of spirit. And while this experience is a sublime pleasure, to simply proclaim that what we seek as pleasure is to promote our disease rather than to heal it. The experience we so desperately seek is only to be found inside of us. It cannot be found in consumption of advertisers' wares. We are, quite simply, looking for love in all the wrong places. Norman Lear believes we have to develop a world that aspires to a great deal more than mediocrity and mindless consumption. We have to start with our values base, our code of ethics. This is the domain and core responsibility of leadership, to articulate and govern to a set of values that allow life on this fragile globe that we share to continue with quality. We have been working with MasterCard International for the past 3 years, assisting them in the reforming their corporate culture. MasterCard is a global icon in the payments industry, seeking to provide leadership for the future of money. As part of this initiative, MasterCard has developed performance goals and values goals, a set of operating principles that are behavioral derivatives of values, set behavioral standards, and send the message that how people at MasterCard get results is as important as the results themselves. The new advertising campaign has as a theme, there are some things in life that money can't buy. For everything else, there is MasterCard. Television commercials portray events built around the expression of core human values. For example, a family reunion, sending the message that such experiences are important and priceless.
Size 4 flowered dress, $45. New color lipstick, $15. Haircut, $25. Autofocus camera, $260. 5 generations in one photograph. Priceless. There are some things money can't buy. For everything else, there's MasterCard. Accepted all over, even photo labs.
The thinking here is to balance the commitment to performance goals and values goals. The use of the payment card to support the event is directed to a performance goal of building market share. The portrayal of the priceless nature of inner human experience is a value statement consistent with MasterCard's values goals. In our consulting practice, we have developed statistically bulletproof data sets demonstrating that, all other things being equal, values-based organizations led from the authentic expression of the human spirit create superior, long-term economic value. We have developed considerable expertise at facilitating enterprises led by men and women who have an appetite for fundamental change, coupled with the courage to be an advocate for productive activities that are values-based and that honors the spirit in the increasingly multicultural and global context of our workplace.
Thank you, Mr. Emery. Let us begin the first question and answer session. We will try to answer as many questions as possible. Therefore, we ask that only one question be asked per phone call, and that these questions be as brief as possible. You may call the studio directly at the phone numbers or fax which now appear on your screen. We remind you to make your phone calls at a distance from the monitor to avoid feedback. Our first question is from Sao Paulo, Brazil, from General Motors do Brasil in the city of Sao Paulo.
With his limits and how they can develop new skills.
We need to hear that question one more time. Did you hear it?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello?
Please repeat your question, please.
How is it important for leaders to know how to deal with his limits and how they can develop new skills?
Did you hear the question? Mr. Emery, do you have a comment?
I believe that I heard the question. What I heard the question as being is how do leaders notice and test their limits, and how do they develop new skills, literally one day at a time. I think that each leader has to continually stretch themselves to go to new performance limits. And as they stretch themselves and as they elicit and get feedback and act on that feedback from the people around them, then they do develop new skill sets. So we'd say here the ingredient that's vital is to take action and then get feedback from other people around the efficacy and impact of that action. And of course implement changes based upon the feedback.
Thank you. Our next question is from Mexico, from El Instituto Tecnológico de León, in the city of León, in the state of Guanajuato, in Mexico.
Greeting to all of you from León, Guanajuato, and our question is the following. What do you recommend in order for us to increase our capacity or the ability to start and develop and even more to maintain real human relations and constructive human relations in the workplace. Thank you.
Mr. Emery?
We need to learn to speak our truth to each other in gentle ways. All of us perceive the world slightly differently and are impacted in different ways by the same events. And we need to be able to talk about it in an environment that's free of fear, free of retribution, and an environment in which we feel that there will be response to our truth, that people are committed to supporting us as people and to supporting us in terms of our ability to perform.
Our next question is from Ecuador, from la Universidad San Francisco de Quito, in the city of Quito, in Ecuador.
Necessary to clarify that I'm calling from the University Espíritu Santo from Guayaquil, Ecuador. What shall we do in a country where the leaders don't have a very well-defined ideology? Do we need to have an individualistic mentality in order to succeed? Thank you.
Yes, well, this is a popular theme that we look to people above us to define our own future. I believe we have to look within ourselves, get clear within ourselves on our values, on our ideology, if you prefer that word, join together with people who have similar values and express those values in the workplace. If enough of us do that, we will get the leaders we deserve, and if enough of us don't, we'll get the leaders we don't like.
Dr. Dunn, what do you think?
Well, I would add to that in South America, in Central America, you have cultures that tend to be more collectivist. And my opinion is that in this country, the individualistic ideology has done a lot to really undermine a sense of collective identity and a sense of working together. So it seems to me that there have to be ongoing conversations about shared values and about collective identity, not about individualism so much.
Thank you. Our next question is from Mexico, from la Universidad La Salle, in el Distrito Federal de México.
Good morning. Greetings from Mexico. Our question is the following. How can the members of a team help their leaders to be better, to improve ourselves as well? Thank you.
Mr. Emery.
Yes, so as members of a team, our opportunity is to gently and authentically give feedback to our leaders around the efficacy and the impact of their behavior and their ideas. I often find leaders who are not being effective absolutely believe that what they're doing is effective, and without feedback to the contrary, they're not able to change. So in a sense, we have a huge responsibility in developing our leaders as people and as effective leaders, and we need to take that on.
Thank you. Our next question is from Panama, from la Universidad Tecnológica de Panamá, in Panama.
A very warm greeting from the bridge of the world and the heart of the world, of the universe. This question is, how can we overcome the obstacles that the companies and organizations have in order to become more collectivist rather than individualistic?
Mr. Emery, how can we overcome the individualistic tendencies in a corporation?
Well, we need business processes and people processes that support team behaviors rather than individual behaviors. So, for example, earlier in the presentation we talked about if you want people to behave as a team, we have to have a compensation and reward system that rewards team behavior. So basically, if what you want is collaboration, team behavior, then all of the recognition systems, the communication systems, and the reward systems need to acknowledge team behaviors rather than promote individual behaviors. You have to get everything aligned in the business system to overcome the old deep-seated tendency to behave in an individualistic fashion.
Dr. Dunn?
I couldn't agree more with Mr. Emery on this point, that what you have to do is change the reward systems. There's a famous article written several years ago now entitled "On the Folly of Rewarding A While Hoping for B." And that's what we do in organizations much of the time. We reward people based on individual goals, and yet what we really hope for is some kind of team effort. That simply doesn't work. I'd also recommend a book to the audience, a book written by Barry Schwartz entitled "The Battle for Human Nature," that really very well outlines how it is that our participation in free market economies tends to reinforce individualistic behavior. I think being aware of those tendencies will give us some insight into how to redesign our organizational systems to encourage team behavior.
Our next question is from the state of Chihuahua in Mexico. It's from la Universidad Autónoma de Chihuahua in the city of Chihuahua.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to give our question. Based on your proposal, what is the difference, the basic difference, between a leader and an administrator, a leader and a manager?
Mr. Emery?
Okay, so, the simplest distinction we can think of making is that a leader, according to Bennis, takes people to places they have not been before. A leader cares for people's spirit, manages and leads their imagination and creativity, and encourages them to be more tomorrow than they were yesterday. A manager, on the other hand, is in the process of getting things done, and an administrator usually in the business of getting things done in a specific way. So management and administration have to do with what we call the mechanisms of business, and leadership has to do with the intention, the energy, and spirit of business.
Thank you. The next question is also from Mexico, from El Distrito Federal. It is from la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, from the Facultad de Medicina, Veterinaria y Zootecnica in Mexico DF.
Gracias, muy buenos días.
Thank you. Good morning. What do you recommend for the development of leaders, of business leaders, for that to be consistent with the development of social values? How can we make this consistent?
I think that perhaps is not my question. I think perhaps it's Dr. Dunn's question, so I'd like to defer. Would you take that on?
I sure would.
Great.
I think the answer is clearly education. One of the things that we haven't done a good enough job at, and Mr. Emery referred to this earlier, is really giving students, and in particular business students, a broad perspective about what it means to be a citizen of the world, what it means to have social obligations. My biggest criticism of business education is that we give people very highly technical training and a very narrow view of the world. I really think it starts with education. It starts with understanding ourselves in relation to others instead of understanding ourselves just as isolated units. The process begins there, and I think it has to continue through management education as well on an ongoing basis within organizations.
Thank you. Now a question from Bolivia, from la Universidad Privada Boliviana in the city of Cochabamba.
Bien, muchas gracias.
Thank you.
La pregunta es la
The
siguiente.
question is the following.
¿En qué medida se puede
In what way
complementar
can we
o complementar
complement or supplement the development of teamwork
y el liderazgo,
and leadership,
siendo este último
since leadership
un trabajo estrictamente individual?
is a very strictly individual work? A leader is only one. How can the leader develop the teams?
Yes, I think perhaps we would disagree with the premise that leadership's highly individualistic. Great leaders understand the needs of the people, both the spoken needs, but more importantly, the unspoken needs. And leaders are able to draw within their own experience of being ideally in a global marketplace, the experience of being citizens of the world, stories that speak to people's hearts and minds and have them come together as a group of people rather than as individuals. So my experience of true leaders is they're not individualistic at all. I think that's an unfortunate metaphor from the John Wayne era that has little value in today's world.
Our next question is from the state of Jalisco in Mexico. It's from la Universidad Autónoma de Guadalajara in the city of Guadalajara.
Buenos días.
We wanted to ask how are these interrelated? That is, the value